Yes. I'm just going to keep an eye on that. All right. Here we go. This week on Tales of Auraxis, we're going to be talking all about vehicles, vehicle balance, the numbers of vehicles, whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether you like them, whether you don't, air versus ground versus infantry, ground versus air. It's all coming right up. Stay tuned. Ah yes, the sweet sounds of freedom. Right here, Tales of Auraxis is now live. I am your host, Bridger. Uh-oh, I'm wearing the wrong shirt! Johnny!
I like your colors.
I'm wearing the wrong shirt. Formerly of the NC, apparently. No, I'm your NC representative here today. Also joining me, my two co-hosts, as always. We have Army Knife from the Vanu Sovereignty. Long live Bill Nye.
Hello, and long live Bill Nye indeed. Science.
And East Clintwood is here from the Terran Republic, where they eat their food in silence while thinking about the glory of the Emperor.
Darn right we do. And taking away freedom. Yeah.
No. Imposing order is not the same, you see. All right, so we are we're here to talk more about PlanetSide 2 again this week, episode number 5. We've got a lot of great things on the plate. Glad you got a hold of the program, however you may have found it. Tell a friend or two, won't you? We do record Sunday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, right on Bridger15's Twitch channel. That's mine, twitch.tv/Bridger15. You can also find a link to that on the sound-strategy.net website. And if you're watching this on the YouTube, you can find all the other shows here, and sound-strategy.net also has all the podcast links for the audio files. So, that out of the way, let's jump right into it. Did you guys have anything awesome happen? I had a pretty interesting notion where I was playing in a Digirev platoon this past, actually today, and we were fighting and slowly pushing down the eastern side of Indar, and suddenly the squad leader's like, well, everybody else is going for the biolab, but the crown is empty, and I want to fix that. So we all go back to the warp gate, and he's like, this is going to be great. We're going to drop on the crown when there's nobody there and stealth cap the crown. And by the time we got there with our galaxy, we got there and we came into range, and we just see all these friendly little blips popping up on our screen, and we're like, aha! So we are not the first ones to notice the crown was empty then. And we did our galaxy drop on the crown as it was finishing being capped by our team. So that was, very exciting. Anything over
mine's
there?
Actually related. Friday, much the same. The crown was completely empty. We were had about a platoon strength worth of guys, and we were spearheading a push, a counterattack, because NC controlled far too much of the map. And we'd pushed our way up to the crown, and we roll in with 2 Sunders, a couple of Prowlers, and most of our infantry, and there isn't a soul to be seen. The NC had just fought like hell for NS data labs. I mean, they were not giving up an inch. And then we finally managed to push through there, and we're expecting this huge, bitter fight at the crown, and there's not a soul to be seen. And we just roll in, kill the 1 or 2 guys that eventually spawned there, and took it. It was really creepy. I mean, it's like people are realizing not to fight at the crown.
Whoa. So, whoa.
Is
this a maturity?
Not in my planet side.
Not in the Vanu leadership. It seems like whoever gets that southeast corner takes the stupid pill.
Well, so I was thinking now, as a community, we're like hitting puberty. Like, the crown is not all there is, because look, girls in the form of a biolab. So I don't know if that's the case. Anything happen on your side, Army Knife?
Not a whole ton to talk about. It's kind of nice to be fighting on the other side of the map now, and I have to hand it to the fact that even though we have a couple of people who are actually rather infamous now among the Vanu leadership community for being idiots, we actually have been able to push out into the rest of Indar a little more frequently than the NC ever did on our server, despite the fact that the NC population is consistently at least 35%, if not higher, usually focused on Indar. But most of it has been we push out, and then one NC outfit in particular, DVS, ends up coming out and swarming and pushing us, while at the same time the TR are like, oh look, purple, we'll fight them, instead of pushing up north to try and take out the Indar stuff that NC has. So there's some frustration amongst the Vanu leadership about why are the TR focusing on us? We only destroyed them multiple times to hold the continent of Indar in the last few months.
We had a beautiful pincer maneuver with the Vanu where we completely encircled the NC, and it was completely uncoordinated. You just see like lines going across the map where we're just capturing that just to completely cut off the NC, and then we both just, we recapture all the filling territories, and next thing you know, we hold everything, and then except for what the Vanu hold, and it was actually really nice.
That reminded me actually of two great things that did happen that should not have slipped my mind for an after action report, but somehow managed to until just now. So the TR on our server have no idea apparently that IRNV scopes exist, and they've also apparently have no idea that they allow you to see through smoke. The NC, on the other hand, tend to run with these because they have close quarters weapons, so we can't really use smoke on them. But against the TR, we had a wonderful battle line at Crossroads Watchtower down to Regent Rock. And we were getting pushed from the Crown. There was some fire coming in from the NC, and the TR were down in the south. And we pushed out against this massive TR infantry Zerg. I'm talking about 60 to 80 players, like heavies, maxes, engineers, the whole shebang were slowly encroaching on us from the southwestern side near Regent Rock up to the Crossroads Watchtower, which you can see now right beneath us. There we go. Yeah, so from that whole Xenotech Labs / Regent Rock area was where they were pushing us.
Those are fun places to fight in. I've always said I like that more than any place else.
And so right across that road that you can see heading to the southwest out of Crossroads, just imagine 80 people with anti-infantry maxes and heavy assaults and engineers and medics, and about half that number of VS. What did we start doing? Myself and another engineer in my outfit who have smoke grenades on our engineer classes on the underbarreled launchers, just started pumping the whole area with smoke, and it looked like a proper infantry maneuver. We had a line of smoke that they could not see through. Our casualty rate suddenly dropped. All of our guys started using IR, and we actually managed to push the twice our numbers all the way to Regent Rock Garrison.
I can't see nothing, Johnny.
And then we tried it on the NC, and of course, because they run IRNV, that didn't work so much. And we also used this trick on Amarish at the Ascent, and I happened to find this wonderful rock that overlooks the road that turns up towards the Ascent. And we'll see it on the map in a second, because as you are well aware, the Ascent has only one way to get to it, and that is by drop pod or Galaxy or some kind of flying vehicle. And so
the Vanu have actually taken the number 1 and redefined it.
Yes. So
impressive.
Right there's that little valley of road, and you can smoke it from the rock that you can see immediately to the left of the southwest pad across the street. There's a rock there. You can sit as an engineer with an ammo pack and smoke that entire valley right beneath there. And because there's a path actually that runs through the mountains from Raven Landing, I believe, which is the other base in that hole that road leads to. And so, yes. And so there's actually that path through the mountains, and they can take asunder up there. So I was smoking that whole area, and it allowed us to hold it really well. And then the TR who were there, and I can't remember the outfit name, decided that they would Galaxy rush us. But they decided that they would Galaxy rush the tower by slamming into it with enough people. So 48 Galaxies individually slammed into it, and then they decided to Sunderer rush us there. And they took about 40 Sunderers.
Wait, how do you you can't get up there with Sunderers unless they
Oh,
came
yeah,
from
you
Raven.
came from Raven
Oh, they
Landing.
came from Raven. Okay.
They held Raven Landing, but the funny thing was they got about up to that turn that I was talking about smoking, and they hit like 3 or 4 lightnings and a few engineers, and the wreckage started piling up to the point they could not drive through.
We
Yeah,
will
they gotta
plug
go in
the
one at a
gap
time,
with the
so.
bodies of their dead.
Yes, we made a wall of their carcasses. So those are some fun after-action reports, and I have to say, if you do not use smoke and IRNV, you're really missing out on some of the most fun infantry combat, especially with an outfit that you can be having, because especially if you come up against a Max, this is how you can one-on-one a Max as a light assault engine.
Where'd
You
it go? He's flying around your head. Can't see
Yeah.
him. Can't shake him.
You
So
smoke them, and then you smoke them.
there you go. So there was a post on Reddit called "Playing as an NC has made me start to wonder, when do I get this bonus check I keep hearing about?" Because if you play the NC, you know that one of the most overplayed voiceovers is when a character comes back from the dead. He tells the medic, "I'll see that you get your bonus check," and so that was a chuckle. But then this guy by the name of Zoran the Bear comes into the comments and he makes it epic. He starts to tell a story of what happens when you log off, what happens to your character. He says, when you log out, your in-game character punches his card for the day, heads over to the barracks as he begins to place his armor, helmet, and gear away in his footlocker. After the clank of metal locker closes, your character brushes the now ungloved hand over his shaved scalp and goes, "Man, tomorrow's just gonna be the same thing again. But at least we took the crown." He'll make his way outside towards the warp gate, taking a big breath of fresh freedom air. After a hard battle, he walks over to the control panel by the warp gate. It's set up in such a way that it reminds you of a small camp made out of metal. Metal poles holding up one of the nanite systems are now portable canopies, which currently house an overweight man clacking away on a too small keyboard. "Hey, Gip, the warp gate ready to take me to the sanctuary? Gotta get to the boys soon or we won't miss our meetup. Charged and ready, freedom fighter. Enjoy. Oh, you forgot. You got some mail today from the big dogs themselves. You got your bonus check." So that's somehow how this ties in. But then the story continues with a fist bump of freedom between Geb and the offline soldier. He takes his extra earnings and steps through the teleporter. After hearing a song similar to the Doctor, he arrives within minutes to a glorious sight. Galaxies towered higher than any hacker or console command can accomplish. Turrets within every doorway, but not a hacker scum in sight. With a smile on your character's face, he waltzes over to his buds, who are currently an almost impenetrable circle of friendship as they discuss their team play for the day. It just keeps going. And with a roar and praise of freedom, your character and his friends go out for a round of drinking delicious freedom. And then he does one more about the NC, or about one more about the VS, and one more about the TR, and it's quite hilarious. Check out the link for their other two. I think they're definitely worth reading. Yes, enough freedom in that one to, even though they're really more like anarchists, but that's really a kind of freedom, isn't it? Somewhat. Alright, so the other thing that you guys might want to check out is this particular post here, and I've got a link to this as well. This shows the difference between Mine Guard Sunderers and non-Mine Guard Sunderers. So if you're an engineer and you see a Sunderer coming, you know whether or not to waste your mine, I guess. There's a very slight difference in the way that they look. You can even see it from the side as well. There's got little rails there and a little rectangular thing in the back. So, not a great tip, but you know, just in case. All right, now this is my question for you, Mr. East Clintwood. Did you participate in the rendering test on Connery?
I did very briefly. I wasn't able to log in and play much that day, but I was there for some of it. So it was really cool that we got to be the guinea pig for that one. And it was nice. It was still a little laggy, but kind of a lot of laggy depending on where you're at.
It got more laggy than normal?
A little bit more than normal. I think they're still tweaking it, but it wasn't much worse. So hopefully after some optimization they'll be able to really get it released. But I mean, for the amount of difference in rendering, there was actually a tiny bit of lag, maybe latency increase. And I don't have the best computer in the world. I'll be the first to admit that. So hopefully it'll be a lot better once it gets optimized. I mean, remember in beta, where even if you had a great computer, the game was horrible and laggy and all that fun stuff.
I remember the technical tests, and I remember logging in and then logging right back out again.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, because it seems like with some optimization, it's going to be a big deal and great, and we can truly own people from halfway across the world. So,
all right, so the last thing I want to talk about in the news this week, since we don't really have a lot of news, we haven't had the February patch come out, we haven't really got any detailed notes on it, we only have the roadmap. We talked all about that last week. So, so what I did want to talk about was this video somebody made that is a mashup between what is essentially The Rock, the Sean Connery movie, with what is it, Nicolas Cage in there too, and a kamikaze attack on the Crown. That if you have not seen it, you need to see it. I'm not going to show the whole thing here; it's like 2 minutes long, but it's totally worth. You can hear actually the movie and in game. You hear like the dichotomy between them. It's very interesting. Definitely check it out. There's a link in the show notes. You can find those on sound-strategy.net. Very cool. All right, let's go to the tip of the week. This is coming from Army Knife. The Vanu Weapons you may not have tried, but probably should.
Yes. I spent a good 2 or 3 hours the other night with a buddy of mine in the outfit, where we were basically comparing, contrasting, discussing, and shooting at each other with a lot of the weapons that you may not have heard of or tried, or the weapons you may have heard of are terrible. We're talking about things like the Ursa, that's very expensive, so most people don't have it. The Flare, most people tend to go for the Pulsar LSW.
Now, hang on. What are those? The Ursa and the Flare? Is that assault rifle?
For those of us that don't worship the great prophet Bill Nye, please explain to us what these devices are.
Give me a second, because there's also the Eidolon and the Pulsar C. Okay, so these weapons are actually in 3 different categories. There's the heavy assault LSWs, or not LSWs, the heavy assault LMGs, which is the Ursa, Flare, and I mentioned the Pulsar LSW, which is probably the most popular of all of the Vanu LMGs, and it has some good reason for that. The Pulsar C is a light assault / engineer weapon, and the Eidolon is our multi-class battle rifle, which pretty much nobody uses across the board. I actually got killed by an NC battle rifle, I think, earlier today for the first time, and I was like, wow, that guy's using it. Cool. So what this whole compare-contrast thing was that we were actually doing was you're comparing grouping, full auto, scope, no scope, and you really should try these weapons. If you just trial them, remember that they get even better with the add-ons, and they could very well be worth the price of admission. Now, we'll start with the Flare and the Ursa. The Flare is the second highest velocity LMG that the Vanu have. And that's important because the Vanu weapons are not necessarily very high velocity, but we have no bullet drop. And it's also a very high damage weapon. These are the Ursa, the Flare, and the Pulsar C are the 3 highest damage automatic weapons that we have as the Vanu. So getting good with these is actually a useful thing. And the Flare is also, like I said, it's the second highest velocity LMG we have, the highest velocity being the Ursa. So with HV ammo, you're already doing pretty good. And the recoil is fairly controllable, but the first bullet multiplier, not so good. The cool thing about the Flare, though, which is why it is actually very worthwhile that you look into investing in it, it's only 250 certs. It's surprisingly easy to get for a weapon that can extend your range. Now, I'm the kind of person who likes to fight in close quarters, but I don't like the spray and pray guns that you use it for. It just doesn't suit my playstyle well. So what is there for me? Well, there's the Ursa and the Pulsar C. The Ursa, like I said, is the highest velocity Vanu weapon that you can get. You put HV ammo on it and a compensator and then a foregrip, and the recoil is actually I counter snipe infiltrators with this gun, and I'm a heavy assault. Okay, and I'm not
now,
talking
when
about,
you
like,
say high velocity, that improves your accuracy at range. Is that the idea?
it improves your damage at range, because remember, we don't have to worry
Oh, that's
about
right. You don't
bullet
have
drop.
bullet drop. I forgot.
So it increases accuracy against running targets, but it increases our damage at range, which is very important. The other thing that it does, which a lot of people aren't going to recognize necessarily, is even though the Ursa is a very slow firing weapon, it's on like the order of the NC6 Gauss saw slow for a Vanu weapon. You'll hear it because it's a very distinct, like, thud, 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 thud kind of weapon. But it's a ridiculous amount of damage. A single headshot is, I believe, 2/3 worth of your shields as a heavy or more. So single shots on this thing hurt. And high velocity ammo in close quarters means you're going to hit first. This thing is probably around 640 meters per second with HV ammo, which means that it is essentially a hit scan weapon up to medium range.
Wow.
As far as the game is, so this thing is fantastic at close quarters with an IRNV scope, because all you do is you just sit there with this manageable recoil because of how slow firing this weapon is, with very high damage bullets. I actually love this thing in close quarters. That's why a lot of people don't try it, is because they want something that's balanced, which is what the Pulsar LSW is. It's very balanced. It's not a winner in any category, but it's generally quite good, and it can get a small cone of fire. Now these weapons that we're recommending are not at all hip fire weapons. You can kind of get away with it with the Ursa because of the low rate of fire, but if you don't want to spend the 1,000 certs to get an Ursa, which I do highly recommend, if you really love heavy assault, go into it. Seriously, it's an amazing weapon. You will love being able to counter snipe, get an IRNV scope for another 30 certs, a 4x scope and the IRNV. You're set for everything, but get the flare, because the flare is essentially a cheaper Ursa with a slightly higher rate of fire and a little bit less accuracy, but just as beautiful. Now, the Eidolon is the battle rifle that most people hate. Why do most people hate?
Like the medic's
battle
assault rifle?
Battle rifle.
What's a battle rifle?
We're talking about, like, for anybody who has played Call of Duty, Modern Warfare games, it's a lot like the M14.
No. I mean, what weapon type is it?
Battle rifle.
No. There is no such thing as a battle rifle.
Oh, yes, there is.
There are assault rifles, carbines.
It's considered I think it's considered a scout rifle, but it's basically a
what class
battle
uses
rifle.
it?
Engineers, medic.
Those are carbines. Okay, now I know what you're talking about.
No, it's not. No, because also heavy assaults. It's a multi-class weapon.
It is?
You're normally not going to see these on the weapon display if you check any one class. Everybody has these weapons. They were very quiet. Not a lot of people use them. Not a lot of people have heard of them across the factions. But I know the VS one is called the Eidolon. That's EIDOLON. And what's cool about this is it's actually a pretty good close quarters to medium range weapon, because it's surprisingly high damage. It's stock 500 meters per second velocity, so it's pretty high velocity. And if you just tap your finger, because it's semi-auto, it can actually fire ridiculously fast with very little recoil. And I tried it out today a bit on the Crown, and I think if it went on sale, I would definitely buy it. Because you can just stick a close quarters sight on it and some HV ammo, a compensator. I think it can mount this stuff. I'd have to check. But you just mount some of this stuff on it, and it's a fantastic weapon to use for these medium range to close range engagements because of how high damage it is with such little recoil. Now, keep in mind, that's only if you like that kind of weapon. If you're the kind of person who loved playing Call of Duty with the M14, you're going to love these battle rifles.
So these are like semi-automatic sniper rifles available for other classes, essentially?
Essentially,
but not super. I mean, they do a lot of damage, but not as much as maybe necessarily the sniper
right,
rifles.
and they don't have the bullet velocity to make up for in other factions the bullet drop that snipers are not going to have, and the high damage at range that other snipers are going to have. So these weapons can actually be quite useful in the right hands. And that outfit person I was doing all of this testing with and checking the bullet grouping and stuff, he was getting tons of kill streaks with the Eidolon, and that was just on the basic version that he was trialing. And like I said, the Ursa, amazing at close quarters. You can counter snipe with this thing because it has no sway, and you can mount a 6x scope on it, and it actually feels like it's worthwhile. Now the Pulsar C, the last one that I wanted to talk about. The Pulsar C, I'm going to nickname the Mini Ursa because it has the same rate of fire and the same damage on a light assault engineer weapon. You give it, it's not quite the same bullet velocity, but it's up there. You give it a compensator, and it has almost no vertical recoil stock. You put on HV ammo, still highly manageable. It can actually mount an advanced foregrip. So I've been using this thing with IRNV scope, advanced foregrip, and HV ammo, and a compensator. It's a hefty 500 or so cert price tag, but it's so worth it because suddenly you're out shooting pretty much any other class. You can at medium range as a light assault counter snipe, for instance. You can do close quarters combat with really high damage. If you get headshots, you're probably going to win. And so remember, it's got a low rate of fire, but that also means more manageable recoil. And the grouping stays fairly tight when you're aiming down the sight. So these are really hard-hitting weapons, and I suggest trying to use these slow-fire, hard-hitting weapons.
I'll have to check that out for the
quarters.
Ursa. I've been looking for something interesting for my heavy assault, and I wasn't... never really been super happy with any of the default heavy assault ones that I got with my Alpha Squad boost, so I'll have to take a look at that.
Yeah, and I have to say too, as far as weapons that people don't use much, I was curious, so I tried out the jackhammer. I have an NC alt. I tried out the jackhammer. It's actually surprisingly fun. It's just that the NC that was on the server that I happen to be playing on are apparently not that good, and I never got into a situation where I could properly use it. But
it's the specialty heavy weapon.
There's a biolab under attack.
Yeah.
Because every NC on the server will suddenly be inside of that biolab with close range maxes, and quite a few people will be using jackhammers. I know this from experience.
On your
I
server.
spent an hour. That server is.
I don't
when
think
you
the
have your
NC.
character on.
I don't think the NC on Watterson got that message because they tend to stick with the piston. But I have to say the jackhammer has an amazingly tight grouping at medium range. You can actually use it as a medium range weapon. And up close, it's a 2-shot kill weapon without headshot.
And it's pretty much fully automatic. I mean, I think it's semi-auto, but you
It's
can fire it very quickly.
It's so fast that
It might as
what
well
I'm
be automatic.
Wondering is why I don't see more TR using the MCG. Because I remember in beta that thing was overpowered as all hell. And I honestly wonder why more TR
Is that
heavy
the
assaults-
Cycler, the Gatling
No,
gun?
the mini chain gun.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yep.
That's a
So
good
it
question.
it's good, but it's. I think a lot of it has to do with the spin-up time on it. A lot of people don't like that. They want to have damage on target because you'll be running. Oh, I see a guy. He's pulling up his gun, and by the time it's ready to fire, you're already dead. Now, that said, if you're going to be in a sustained firefight and you can take the second to take cover and start using it, I've seen guys just mow through whole squads with them.
Yeah,
So-
and I think that's the issue, is just that a lot of the people who tend to play TR, at least on Watterson, tend not to be the kind of people who sit there and think about how they're going to go about killing things. They
Yeah,
just
see, when I first started playing in the beta, I was playing on the TR for a while, and I saw that the heavy assault got this like chain gun thing, so I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then when I was playing NC, I went to look for the chain gun equivalent. I was like, where the hell is this? It's got like they shit is special. They don't get nothing. We get a fucking shotgun. I already have a shotgun. This shotgun's not that much better, but as Army Knife says, it does have surprising accuracy, so that as opposed to, you know, most shotguns becoming semi-useless at about 15 to 20 meters, this one will work well even out to about 30 or 40 meters. You might have to, you need more than a few shots, but with a regular shotgun, just say goodnight. You're not going to do anything.
Yep, and the other thing about the jackhammer is insanely high projectile velocity. You're not going to have to lead targets very much with that thing, even at medium range. Which is again
it's
the other
point click person dies. It's really that.
Which is again the other advantage that you know people really need to realize about with those other weapons that I mentioned, like the flare and the Ursa. Hit scan in this game in close to medium range is a godsend. If you can get a weapon that is that high velocity and high damage, you're going to be.
I was waiting for you to notice that.
you're going to be just wrecking people because hit scan does make a significant difference, especially with the range. And yes, as Magister X is talking, NC weapons by proxy, yes, except for the lack of bullet drop, which is like it's like if the NC were actually scientific about things.
All right.
Because of science.
Yes, because of science. All right, let's move on. We got a big roundtable discussion
Yeah, I
this
was going
week.
to say, that's a really big one today.
Absolutely. This one is all about vehicle balance because there's a lot of different aspects to vehicle balance. And I think we kind of have hinted at this, talked about the peripheries of this, but I really want to go in depth and talk about all the different aspects of it. And I want to start with a post on Reddit, which is sort of similar to a lot of other posts that I saw when the Annihilator came out, and a lot of people started using it as Army Knife said, it is very effective if a whole squad just carries around Annihilators because you can deal with almost any threat, no matter the cost. So he basically starts talking about the overabundance of lock-on missiles has ruined the game for me, and he's obviously coming from a pilot's perspective. And there's a lot of different comments, some people agreeing, some people disagreeing, some people saying that's just because you were overpowered for so long, and how does it feel to be balanced now, etc., etc. So lots of different sides of this argument. So my question is this: how do you guys feel about the air versus ground balance right now? Do you feel like you're seeing enough planes that are effective but not too effective? What do you think, East Clintwood? What's the current balance?
I spend far too much time in a Mosquito. At first, it's kind of battle dependent, because sometimes there'll be those huge battles where all of the infantry are so busy fighting on the ground that they don't have time to shoot you, and you're just engaged in this huge air battle, shooting down Reavers and Size. But at the same time, there's those other times when you're assaulting a well-defended position, or even coming in to defend one that's being attacked, and it seems like you come barely within render distance of anything, and next thing you know, 3 different guys are locking you and there's missiles. So it's kind of an even thing, because most of the time it's just like, okay, I'm locked, I'm gonna leave, no problem, fly out of the area, come back. But there are times when it's really excessive, and every time I come within X distance of Mao Tech Plant, I'm getting 20 dudes shooting missiles at me. That kind of sucks. I don't really mind it like so much because it's not a big occurrence, at least on my server. But it does happen, and it can be annoying because you really can't do anything except for pop lone stragglers at that point because you can't get anywhere close to the battle.
What do you think, Army Knife? So hang on. East, before I jump to your Army Knife, what is your overall feel? Does it feel balanced? Does it feel okay now?
I want to say no because I feel that it has the potential to really get out of control. I don't think my server's quite grasped that yet, and I'm thankful for it, but as soon as more people really start using it coordinated, I think it can get bad. So I want to say no because of that.
So Army Knife, Adjudicator in the chat says, if there's 20 people on the ground all pointing up at the air with their, lock-on missile launcher, well, you should die because you're fighting larger numbers. But at the same time, there are very few pilots in the game in comparison to the number of people comfortable fighting on the ground. So, is that a situation where it's like 20 versus 1, you should die?
Yeah, I think it is, and I have to ask how long you've been playing on Waterson. Because I remember the great days of the TR Air Zerg, and lately there's been a lot of NC
no, there's
Air
always
Zerg.
A ton of pilots, but come on, there's still way more people on the ground than there are in the air.
What I have to say is I think it is balanced, especially because the Annihilator is just see a lot of people go into it, and especially because of its low damage, it requires a group of people to work with, which means you're probably going to only see outfits deploying it, or a few people who happen to play together. As far as lock-on weapons overall, they're the only thing that keep ESFs at bay. Burster maxes don't do very much unless you have about 5 of them. And how many times are you ever going to want 5 Burster maxes out of a squad of 10? Even with the addition of Sunderer, Walkers, and Rangers, still, that's not a lot of anti-air.
Wait a minute. The 2 anti-air things you can put on a Sunderer are Walker and Ranger. Is the next one going to be called Texas?
That's pretty Rangers on Sunderers now? That's my next question.
I think it might just be the Walker, but anyway, the issue is that post to me sounded like somebody who's a lone pilot who does not coordinate with people. And this game really ultimately is all about teamwork, and that is
a really big thing. If you're flying solo by yourself without a wingman or 5,
yeah, you're going to expect.
And you're flying into that. You're just
Yeah,
it's
so
hard. You're
if
going to get
if you're
shot
alone,
down a lot.
be smart about it too. The thing is that I've seen a lot of lately, for whatever reason, a lack of quality in pilots for every faction, and I think it's new people getting in, people not quite used to it. But hey, I get about 5 kills in a row, so I'm not complaining. In a scythe, mind you, not
Yeah.
from the ground. But there are certain areas where you should be smart and not engage, or realize that you're going on a suicide run and you may just be buying time for your guys on the ground. That I think is the perspective that you need to have, is that you either need a lot of air people coordinated, or you need to realize that it's going to be a one-way trip in most cases. That said, when an air zerg happens, no amount of annihilators is really going to turn that around, because they're likely going to be having liberators or galaxies with them, or a lot of ESFs with rocket pods. And I think when we talk about the vehicles specifically, I'm going to go into why I think they have accidentally made the Liberator obsolete.
All right. Yeah, we'll get there in a second. That's an interesting concept. But getting back to the sort of overall feel of things, what is the role of air power in the game? Obviously, the galaxies for transport, that's fine. But what's the role of air power in the game? Is the role to support the ground, or is the role to just dominate? I mean, that's a very important question when it comes to trying to decide if it's balanced or not. Because if the role of air power is to support troops on the ground, or is the support of air power to, like, flatten defenses before the ground troops get there, or what? Because you get to the point where if the problem is you can fight things in the air and you can fight things on the ground. And the advantage of fighting on the ground is you can actually capture territory. The advantage of fighting in the air is you can move much faster across the terrain, because you're moving, in a straight line instead of through fucking gorges and shit. And the other advantage of being in the air is because you can move very fast, you can also get away and heal and come back. That's sort of another small advantage. But at the same time, okay, you've got air power and you've got ground power, but the fact that you can't cap as an air unit, and the fact that there's a huge disadvantage of when you're up there in the sky, everybody on the ground can see you, and everybody in the air can see you. You become a massive target, whereas on the ground you have a thing called cover. If they had, like, clouds in this game at, like, the 700 meter mark, that would be really cool. But at this point, you're a massive target. So I have to wonder, what is the role of air power if it's pretty much the same as ground, except without the advantage of being able to capture anything, and with the massive disadvantage of being a target for everybody on the ground?
I think the role of air was meant to be twofold. But one, with the obvious transport, and two, which is supporting the ground. I don't think air was ever meant to go ahead of the ground, because you really need ground forces to root out anti-air and to keep the infantry occupied from shooting you down, and to find lightnings and the lightning sky guards and take them out. But that being said, there's a little issue that it's called cover, but it's called render distance cover. Infantry are very hard to see without zoom. So you have to get in very close and fly very close to the terrain and make yourself a huge target. I would have liked to have seen more pilots' perspectives from the render distance increase tests on Connery, because if you're flying a ground attack ESF, I think that's your primary concern, is the infantry that you cannot see but who can lock you. And I think that is the real issue with lock-ons, is not so much that they exist, but that you never, 80% of the time, have no idea who is locking you from where or why. Usually it's whether or not it's an aircraft, because somebody will have spotted them from the ground and they'll be on your mini-map and you can
I would just kill for an indicator that it's like you're being locked by, whether it's an air-to-air or a surface-to-air, because that alone doesn't have to be specific, doesn't have to say who's doing it, but just that information would be fantastic. Sorry, continue, but
I agree with that, and that's a wonderful point, because then okay, I need to get below lines of sight, and I need to break lines of sight that way, or I need to turn and engage, because those are really your only two options at that point, depending on the type of target. And when you cannot see the targets you're supposed to be in the role of engaging, that's a serious issue, and that's the only only benefit to the mounted turret weapons that can have a ridiculous amount of zoom is the zoom compensates for the render distance issue. But still, when we get to the whole Liberator issue, I'll go into why this actually matters.
I was going to say, yeah, I can rant quite a bit about this when once we get to Liberators.
To me,
and then,
I wonder if, most games or most things in life to some degree have sort of natural hard counters and soft counters and things like that, and it usually turns into a rock, paper, scissors thing. But to me, what can air do that ground can't? Well, usually a Liberator or a rocket pod ESF or something can hit the enemy from angles where their cover makes their cover irrelevant, right? So if you're pushing in from the east and the enemy is entrenched behind all the different defensive structures on the walls, behind rocks and all kinds of things, then they have a huge advantage against you from that direction, because that's the direction they're fighting. They're fighting from behind these rocks. So you have a much harder time hitting them. They're going to be poking their heads out, they're going to be popping, they're going to be coming back. But one Liberator flying over that whole thing can hit everybody there, because they're only taking cover from the direction on the ground, right? They can't take cover from the air unless they're in a building, obviously. So that's the advantage that air has. It allows you to attack from a different direction than the ground. However, that comes with the limitation, as we said before, of being very vulnerable. And I kind of wish that the anti-air units would also have to be vulnerable in the same way to the ground forces, so that ground could also support air. Like, I don't know how to do it. Maybe make Burster Maxes light up on mini-maps more easily, more effective. It's hard to say.
Well, here's why. Yeah, because I think lightnings are sort of balanced in that way, because everybody knows where a lightning is shooting from. That's
right, you can see
obvious.
those tracers from forever.
And if you required Burster Maxes to have to lock down, that would do it. They already stand still anyway.
Yeah, give them more accuracy, but make them lock down.
That's not bad.
So that would be a nice thing. The other role of air, though, that I always thought air really should be filling is kind of what the Zephyr initially did, which was as a counter to massive infantry movements and pushes. Because the way it is right now, that's been nerfed to the point where if you have a massive infantry push, what do you use to counter that? You can't use air. The air is going to get shot down unless you have a huge amount of air. So usually all you do is you mount another counter infantry push and it becomes a slugfest. There's no strategy to that anymore.
Yeah. And I love the idea of actually the Burster Max is sort of locking down, because often they can just follow their target around objects and things like that. This would sort of make them choose the highest ground they can find and stay there in order to be in target range. The other thing I don't like about Burster Max, I love it when I am a Burster Max, but the damage obviously has a massive fall off over distance. But I feel like the damage when you're really close as a Burster Max is really too much. If you're directly underneath a mosquito as it's flying right at you, dropping rockets or whatever, it takes more than 3/4 of its health in less than a few seconds if it's within 100 meters. It's pretty ridiculous what a single Burster Max with dual bursters on it can do if it can land all of its shots when an enemy is really close. I like how much damage that the bursters do at medium range, because no matter what, it's going to force an ESF. I'm specifically thinking about ESFs when I'm talking about this. You can, tweak the damage numbers for the other air values, but I kind of wish that close range damage was a little bit less. At the same time, I don't think rockets should be as effective against the maxes either, because I like the fact that they're a counter, and I don't want rockets to just, oh, you're trying to counter me with your max. Here, I'll just rocket you to death. There's your hard counter. We don't want that to happen, obviously. But I wish the bursters just weren't so strong. It feels like if I go in for a run as an ESF, I'm fine up until I get close enough to actually shoot, at which point I'm shredded to death. I can fly around the exterior of the base with impunity, taking enough damage to have after about 10 or 15 seconds, but if I go in close enough to actually shoot and see people, I die. And that's a huge problem for me.
It is, and I have to say it's a huge issue. That's the biggest issue I've hit, and let me say that I think the way it's set up right now, the best anti-infantry ESF is conceptually is the Scythe, and the reason why is that the anti-ground weapon that that the scythe mounts is the PPA, the same thing that our tanks can mount, but it fires very rapidly. It's essentially the big brother to the lasher. It does a lot of direct damage, and it has a significant amount of splash, and it fires quickly. So this should be a great counter to infantry Zergs, but then you run into the render distance issue, where you're getting so close, everybody can see you and lock you and shoot you, which is the same thing you're saying.
Maybe that's the real problem. Maybe the weapons aren't the problem. Maybe it's not lock-on missiles. Maybe it's render distance.
It's rendered, but not only that, it's the fact that rocket pods are still the more effective anti-infantry weapon. Really, rocket pods in real life are almost never used against infantry because they don't do jack shit. They're meant for punching through heavy armor, which is really what they should be limited to. I was happy when they limited the amount of, or limited the range and the max damage in those rocket pods, but then it turned out not to matter. They still do just as much damage to infantry. They just got a little more accurate. With pilots got a little more accurate and learned to compensate. Really, there should be like no splash damage on those rocket pods. They should be hitting armored targets, and it should require you to switch to your main weapon or your secondary, as you want to consider it, and use that for anti-infantry. And that makes a whole lot more sense.
And I would honestly love to see the main gun, your projectile weapon of choice, whichever it is for your specific ESF. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but our close-range, wide-cone anti-infantry guns absolutely suck. And so everybody's been forced to use their rotary or rotary equivalent. And
except for me, I love the PPA.
And they've just been nerfing those because everybody's been trying to snipe at infantry with those if they don't have rockets. And I would like to see some kind of dedicated, maybe an anti-infantry gun, because then you have to aim. It's much harder. Don't have it do tons of damage to aircraft to balance it out. And take away the splash on rockets. Their primary purpose should be killing armor. So,
you know what? You know what they should really do, in my opinion, is they should just do.
I think they should have two different kinds of rockets. Actually, I feel like they should have
just like they do with turrets.
Just like they do it, they have the Zephyr and the Dalton. One's for killing infantry; it's a high explosive. The other one's for killing tanks.
Then you wouldn't have to nerf the damage against Sunderers, because that used to be a great counter to Sunderers, was to take a couple of ESFs and use rocket pods. But they nerfed that damage to try and make up for all this.
Oh yeah, you can't kill a Sunderer in one run anymore unless every single rocket hits. Then I think you might be able to do it if you shoot it all from the back.
Not even shooting at the back.
Really? Okay.
At least for the Vanu, because we have the weakest rockets. You guys might be able to do it. Our rockets will get it to half health if you hit it from the back with every rocket. The Vanu have really terrible rocket pods, but the PPA is good. But what they should do for you guys, for your anti-infantry things, instead of making them wide cone of fire crap, just grenade launchers that shoot a lot. Seriously, just mount those like we have our PPA. Just give you guys a lot of drop off. Make it sort of similar, because it works great for me. Not a lot of people mount it, but I love using it against infantry because it really is incredibly effective. And if they did something similar for you guys, I think you'd start seeing more people using them.
You know what? That's interesting. I would like to see, like, World War II dive bombing. Just 500-pound bombs stuck underneath the ESF. We don't need no rockets. Just... And then they can sell those horns that they had on the Stukas, so that when they're actually coming in, it's like a terror horn. That would be cool.
That would be great.
You just turn it into a cat.
The internet loves cats.
He flies the cat, Stuka. I was going to say, actually, I've been playing far too much War Thunder this last week, and I got back. I was playing Planetside the other day, and let me tell you, after you spend 3 days straight flying War Thunder, and you hop in and you hop in your Mosquito, you can't fly at all. I promptly flew about a minute out of my warp gate and tried to turn my rudder and fell out of my airplane. It was terrible. Out of my ESF, it was terrible.
Wait, you fell out?
Because I pressed E, because I was like, I just need to make a minor course adjustment here, and not even thinking, I press E to turn my rudder, which obviously Planetside doesn't have that precise of controls. And next thing I know, I'm falling out of my ESF, and I sit there and I turn to my Alpha Beta, and I'm like, Waffles, I just did something really dumb. So, yeah.
All right, I'm downloading War Thunder. I did not know that was out. I've been waiting for it to come into beta.
I've been playing it the last week or so. I've pretty much been playing that, Planetside, and Eve, just those 3 games. So.
All right, so should we move on to the next topic?
All right, yeah. So hang on. Blah, 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 blah. Now, actually, one more thing. Here's one more question. Now, the lock-on missiles all cost either a significant amount of certs or SC to unlock. And for a while, the Burster Maxes also did, and so does the Lightning Skyguard. And that was a huge problem, which everybody agreed there was a major problem if you, especially if they, let's say PlanetSide 2 gets even more popular again and they open a new server. On that new server, if you get new players, I don't know, that just seems like a major problem. You're requiring people to get these lock-on weapons or other things that now counter stuff. So now a lot of people have Annihilators. That's the current thing, which now means that the ESF pilots don't have a choice. They have to get flares. You like to have all kinds of choices and customizations, but there is no choice when it comes to that. Flares are the only choice. So the fact that players buy lock-on weapons now force the other players to get flares. And if you get flares, then they're going to buy more bursters, and then they're going to stop it. It's just a vicious cycle.
Am I a caveman for never having sorted into flares still and still using
think so,
my
man. Flares save me a lot.
And I know they would save me too if I sorted into that, but I stuck with my emergency fire suppression system, which I still think is pretty cool because it gives you health back. It doesn't.
Oh wait, it does give you health back. Everybody said that, but then somebody else said no, it doesn't.
Oh yeah.
How much health does it give you?
It seems like it's variable how much, but sometimes it gives you up to a third of my like a third health back or a quarter health back. So it can be a significant amount back as soon as you hit the red to just pop that thing. It doesn't really help when you have a lot of Annihilators shooting at you, but flares won't help much either.
All right. So anyway, we talked a lot about air. Let's talk about more general. What are your guys' feelings on the overall numbers of vehicles in the game? Because we've seen plenty of times where an entire platoon will just say, let's have some fun, and everybody grabs a Galaxy and flies into the crown. That is fun, it's hilarious, but it kind of makes you think, like, how can these factions just afford to throw away all those Sunders or all those Galaxies, even pull that many to begin with? And it's like, who cares? And then whole entire platoons or outfits will grab, and you'll see a giant tank column rushing over towards the thing, which is basically uncounterable if the enemy didn't already get their own tank column and bring it to the right place ready for them in the first place. So I'm asking you guys, how do you feel about the ease at which it is to get all the vehicles in this game? Is it too easy? Are there too many of them? Or are there just enough? Or are there not enough? What's your thoughts there, East?
Well, I want to say I'm happy with the strength overall, mostly of the vehicles, but I want to say also at the same time that they're just too easy to get because as just like Matt is just saying in chat, vehicles are fine. It's the Zergs that are the problem because you'll get 60, 70 people rolling around in tanks, and at that point, as you said, there's not anything that's going to effectively counter it, and they're so easy to get that by the time I go through my vehicle rotation, the vehicle I like most is already back. So it's just, and because resources are nothing, I can afford it, and you can just keep chain spawning the same vehicle over and over again if you just don't fail in the first 2 to 3 minutes. So, it's just too easy to get them, honestly. I think they need to. I don't have an answer for what could make this easier to do, but I just feel that they're just too easy to get.
I kind of wish all the players have their own resources, right? What if instead of players having the resources, what if the facilities themselves had a stockpile of resources?
They did that in PlanetSide 1, which was how the base, it required you to ferry resources from a base that was specifically a nanite pump to the base to operate the shields and everything else, which would be really cool to implement in this. But I don't think having universal faction-wide or facility-wide resources for bases would be good simply because of the number of trolls in warp gates alone. People would just start spawning stuff specifically to run resources out.
Sure, yeah, no, that's true. Maybe instead of, let's say, you still have your own resources, but only X many can be spawned from a given point within a given time. I don't know, maybe that doesn't solve anything, really.
And I don't think the vehicle Zerg is an issue, because honestly, some of the most memorable and fun fights that I've had have been when two vehicle Zergs meet, and it's
That's
suddenly
true.
absolutely.
That's true.
massive tank columns. As far as the ease of purchase, I don't think that's a huge issue either. Because the problem that you usually end up running into with these massive vehicle purchases and all these vehicle Zergs is not so much being on the receiving end of them as being stuck in the middle of one of them, because there's so much lag and people on flashes trying to get by and people ramming you and people team killing because they feel like you've somehow given them the middle finger by some kind of server client mix-up due to lag that causes them to go flying across the map.
Cut off my thunder.
Yeah, so that's the only issue I have with these, and that's more because you're playing with you're in the middle of a vehicle Zerg. That's just kind of the way it has to go. It's like being in the peloton of the Tour de France. If somebody goes down, everybody around you is going to go down. And I think that that's just the nature of it, and I don't necessarily think that it needs a change. I think what does need to be addressed is the fact that not only are I finally come around. It's not only are resources redundant, but they fill a role that does not actually exist in PlanetSide 2.
All right, so that's where we're getting to next. We've got a resource cost on vehicles, and we've got a spawn timer on vehicles, which both essentially accomplish the same thing. It's a very redundant design. I kind of wish there was some better way. I almost wish, let's say, we had the sort of the nanite system you were talking about from PlanetSide 1, where you have, the various facilities have their own levels of resources that slowly get filled up. So instead of players gaining the resources, the facilities would gain resources. However, players would have a certain amount of, to prevent some kind of some trolls messing around with it. You'd prevent them from doing it by saying they could only requisition a certain amount of points per certain amount of time. I don't know. That would probably do the same thing. It'd get too redundant. What do you guys think? Is there a way to just simply get rid of one of these, the spawn timer or the resource cost, and say be done with it? I mean, it seems like the resource system needs to be overhauled. Actually, it's not on the roadmap.
Yeah. I think just get rid of the resource system entirely. Replace it with the point system for territory conquest, like we were talking about last time.
I agree. There's just right now the resources are so superfluous that just like I said earlier, I can go through my 3 favorite vehicles, and by the time I'm done with those, I can already get resources are already refilled by then. And
as long as you have at least like a third of the map, most of the time, that's plenty.
Yeah,
and not only that. But I've been running into the issue of not enough infantry resources because I have unlocked AT mines, and I use medic pouches, or the instant heal medic things, and I use grenades, and I use concussion grenades, and they all cost 75% or 75 infantry resources each, and then you have maxes on top of that.
Yeah,
and really, if you're not operating without any one of these things, suddenly your class is essentially incomplete. Even if you just don't have grenades, your class is incomplete.
Oh, yeah.
So why is there
you
even
see the guy go around the corner into a building, and you're like, I got him. Johnny, where's the grenades? We couldn't afford them, boss. Damn it.
So why is there even a resource cost for this stuff? It's counter to the way the game plays naturally and the core engagement of the game. It's like they're saying, no, you can't have too much fun. You have to wait. You don't want to get a brain freeze on all those grenades and medic packs that you're using. So they just need to eliminate it entirely, make it that you just cert unlock things, and that's it. Especially with the fact that I have heard, I don't want to necessarily say it's more than a rumor, but that they're going to do the same thing in PS2 that they did in PS1, which is cert resets, so you can recert stuff.
Well, here's the thing. The way that the individual resources work right now, the goal of the resource... drive combat. You should say, we need to go get this because we're low on vehicle resources. I think that's part of the reason. Otherwise, there would be no point in tying it to territory, any specific territory. You got 3 things, you get this many resources like that. So the point, obviously, is to make resources on the ground matter so that you go and actually actively try to get them. That's 1. 2, resources are obviously also supposed to stop individual players from spamming a lot of the same type of vehicle, which, as East already mentioned, completely is superfluous because of the rate at which they come in most of the time. So to me, even if you were to lower the rate, here's the problem. Lowering the rate of when resources come in is very difficult, because if you lower it to the point that somebody who just pulls a tank whenever the platoon leader says, let's grab a tank column going, or, Joe, I need you to go grab a tank to escort this Sunderer, then he's not using his tank resources very often. He's playing mostly a ground pounder, going into the tank sometimes. Then if you've got a guy who plays the armor support for his outfit, and he's always in a tank, he is going to be using resources at a much faster rate. So the goal of this is to prevent a huge amount of just tanks everywhere and planes everywhere, because people can afford them. However, people with different playstyles are using them at different rates, which means there's no one number that you can slide this value to in terms of income that will balance it for both the guy who always goes in the tank and the guy who doesn't. So right now we're sitting in the middle, where somebody who goes in a tank all the time might sometimes be inconvenienced, but the guys who only go in a tank sometimes have enough resources every single time they want to. That's why I feel like it needs to be a factional limit, or a continent limit, or something like that.
Or not even necessarily a limit, because you have to ask, at least with resources, which is the current subject more than anything, is what is the purpose of resources in a game? And that's going out to, well, where does this concept even come from? Typically it comes from RTS games. And what is the purpose of a resource unit in a real-time strategy game? It is a barrier to prevent you from getting too much of a certain type of thing, or to require you to invest a certain amount of time and resources and map conquest to get a certain unit, and or to balance units out, like in games like Company of Heroes or Dawn of War 2, where the units, the resources exist purely as a balancing mechanic. And is that even something that's needed in PlanetSide 2? And I think the answer is no, because in PlanetSide 2, we already have the timer mechanic, which works great in first-person shooters. This has been a mechanic for vehicles since Battlefield 1942. Nobody has complained about it, really, since then. The only thing that people do is they complain about a jet being stolen in those games. And that's not the issue here, because nobody's stealing jets.
Now, hang on. The other thing that resources do is they're supposed to force you to make interesting decisions. If you're playing Command and Conquer or Warcraft or whatever, StarCraft, and you've got X many, minerals and X much gas in StarCraft, what do you do? Do you make this unit, or do you make that unit? In PlanetSide, there's no interesting decision. They're like, well, I could make a main battle tank, but then I would be dreadfully low on resources. Maybe I should think about saving it and taking a flash instead. You don't ever think that. You just take a main battle tank if it's available. If it's not, you take a lightning. If you can't get that, you get a Sunderer or a flash. So there's no interesting decisions at the moment. But how could you make interesting decisions for your character with regards to that? I kind of feel like it would be nice if maybe once every 24 hours, or once every couple hours, or once every something, you could sort of set up a resource distribution and say, for my character, I want this much of the incoming resources diverted to infantry, this much of the incoming resources diverted to, tanks, and this much going to air.
With the timer, why even do that? I mean, it just hampers the way that most outfits operate, because most outfits are not enclave sized, they're not devious sized, they're not VDRS sized, they're not 666 sized. They're at most usually 20 to 30 people online. If that's a fairly large sized outfit, is 20 to 30 people online at once for an op night. So if you need to run air, you're going to need to have everybody switch to air. You can't afford to have dedicated air players like that.
True.
Which is the role that the timers all get this stuff. And I don't think the timers are a bad thing. I think that they're good, because it means that you have breathing room. If you manage to, it's the reward for players who manage to kill the Liberator. Even if the guy has sorted into it to the point where they now have they can just respawn a Liberator. even just going back to the warp gate or something to get one, to finding an area to get one, getting it up, getting everybody inside, and bringing it back provides breathing room for your infantry to do whatever the hell they need to do. So it's more of a breathing room reward to actually kill these vehicles, which is what the timers do. And I don't think we should look at it as a means of limiting the players who are using the vehicles, but as rewarding the players who are trying to defend themselves against these vehicles or use to counter them or whatever. It should be a reward system for the people who are making the kills, as opposed to a way of limiting the people who are trying to use these things.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point about the timers being enough, and not only that, East, the resource system even has a sort of slippery slope mechanic where if one side starts to get pushed towards their warp gate, the side that desperately needs resources more than any of the other sides is the one that can't get them. Do you see that as a major problem with the game, or is that
I see that as a huge problem with the game. Again, with our everybody just picks one continent and steamrolls it meta that is still very popular, that contributes to it greatly, because rather than sitting there and like, well, I could defend, but I'm going to get like 2 tanks and 2 fighters, and by then I'll be out of resources. It's going to take me forever to get new ones. I'm just going to go over here where I can get what I want to play in and go have fun. And because they're not going to get that stuff refreshed because we've got all of 7 territories. So I do see that as a problem. That's why I like the timer. I love the timer as a restriction mechanic. The resources, just not so much. I like resources being in the game. I just wish they would be repurposed to something more relevant or related. Something, nice, strategic, but not what they're currently being used for. Infantry resources aside, those I use the crap out of.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to our last episode. Make it, a weekly
point system.
Points system that adds up for the entire faction.
Yeah.
It gives you guys some kind of reward in the shop.
Cert bonus or something. Something. Give you some kind of bonus.
Or, yeah, like a discount on even a discount on buying station cash. Because that's going to encourage people to spend. Because that's going to encourage people to spend $5 on the game, which is always.
We conquered Indar. Let's celebrate by buying Smedbucks. So here's
let's give Sony their bonus check for that.
So my major thing then, the last sort of thing is Magister X brings up an interesting question. Why have limits? Why not just let anybody take a vehicle whenever they want? Well, that brings up an interesting question. Most of the time you have a limit on a particular thing because it's more powerful than other things, right? In StarCraft, the mothership for the Protoss is extremely expensive, because if you could build motherships the same way you could build zealots, the game would be way over unbalanced, right? There's no way. So resources and costs and limitations are a way of balancing games. So the question is, should tanks, vehicles, air units be more powerful than straight up infantry ground pounders? Or should they be less powerful? Or should they be, if they're more powerful, if we say they should be more powerful, then basically we're saying, one Liberator should be able to fight a whole bunch of infantry and do a lot of damage. And if we're saying they're not supposed to be more powerful, then we're saying one infantry guy should be able to one-on-one a Liberator, right? That doesn't sound right either.
Most of the time.
Yeah, that doesn't sound right either. In order for vehicles to have any point in the game, other than just looking cool, you have to have them be more powerful than infantry by default, because they come with a grave limitation. They can't capture points, and therefore there's no point in being in a vehicle if you don't have somebody who can capture a point, right?
And they already can't capture points, but
right.
I think vehicles, if you looked at the, say, PlanetSide 1, vehicles were overpowered. You actually could not possibly kill one unless you had a very organized infantry push or other vehicles, and that was an issue. I actually think the infantry versus vehicles thing is fairly well balanced right now, aside from the whole lock-on anti-air issue, because, a single Prowler can actually be a threat to a squad, unless that squad is very well out, and they know how to essentially psychologically outplay the guy in the tank. What's cool is I have seen and taken part in mixed infantry tank combat and it turned out awesome. It was like it was beautiful to
That's some of the most fun I have.
Yeah, it's a line. We went up against a line of TR tanks on Esamir, the best continent for this to possibly happen.
Yes.
And the guys who were and it was like 3 mag riders, I think maybe what we had, and a couple of lightnings, and mostly infantry. And they had about 5 prowlers all lined up. Whoever was there was not coordinating them, and I don't think they were coordinating in any way, because they should have held that line, and they actually could have pushed us back by holding the line. Instead, one of them, instead they start charging us, and so we actually tore them to shreds because we're infantry. Tanks ran into the middle of a swarm.
Yeah.
No idea why that happened, but I do think there's a good balance, because in order for us to have countered that, they needed to make the stupid mistake that they did.
Right.
If they had held their ground, they actually could have held off a large push of infantry that had minimal tank support. And I think that, especially because they had a terrain advantage in that particular case too. So I think that it is very well balanced, aside from the air issues we've been discussing.
So, to me, I think the most, like what you're talking about, is the combination of units. What makes for a fun battle in terms of numbers? I think a combination of mostly infantry with a few vehicles and a few air units makes for the most fun engagement. Like you're talking about, if you've got, I mean, we've all played tons of first-person shooter infantry games, right? When Battlefield 1942 comes out and starts mixing vehicles in with the infantry, it becomes, wow, that's really cool. But in Battlefield, almost everybody was an infantryman, except for the 2 guys who managed to grab the tanks that spawn on the map. Those had hard limits, and so you can't have more than 2 tanks because that's how many spawn, right? Yeah. And some maps had more, obviously. Don't hold me to that. So my point is, I almost wish there was a system that said Faction X can support X many tanks based on the territory that they hold, or Faction X can support Y many tanks based on the territory they hold.
That would be an interesting system.
And,
I mean, you capture territory.
I think it should be limited.
Then we get an extra 20 tank slots. I mean,
because then you have the same issue that you already have with the resources, which is you run through your resources very quickly. You're going to fill up your tanks.
I'm okay with that, though. I'm okay. See, that's where I have a different view that probably a lot of people, other people wouldn't necessarily agree with. But I enjoy the infantry combat in the game, and I like that tanks show up and it's scary. That's fine. And I like that you have to say, okay, we need a bunch of guys with decimators or annihilators or whatever, flank around, get on that rock, try to take them out. I really like those sort of long-range engagements with a few tanks that make the game really interesting. And I wouldn't mind not getting a tank because of the limit, but I'm obviously maybe an exception here. I kind of envision a system whereby, based on the territory that you hold, you can have... No, that's not good either, because that runs into the same system. But let's just say each faction can have, let's say, 100 tanks. Just pulling a number out of my ass, it can be balanced, whatever. 100 main battle tanks. And after that limit is reached, somebody goes to a terminal and tries to summon a tank, it'll put them sort of in a queue, and their position in the queue will be based on how far they've sorted into their tank tree. I don't mind
about how far they've sorted into it, because then
but that dedicated tank people would
not
get
only
it
that,
there
you're
sooner.
going to end up with people purposefully team killing tanks so that they can get their tank spawned from the queue.
Yeah,
I don't think you want to have those kind of limiting mechanics.
I hate that good design has to fucking bow to all these troll maneuvers. You're right. You're right. Damn it.
Yeah,
I still think that...
not only that, but you have to remember that that's going to run into the same issues that we already have. Don't limit the vehicles, because honestly, the best counter to a massive tank Zerg is a properly balanced air and infantry engagement, or another tank Zerg. Actually, some of the coolest battles I've had have been tank Zerg versus tank Zerg, just because they end up happening at very large distances, like battleships shooting at one another from kilometers away, except in this case from like 800 meters to a kilometer. and you're just exchanging fire over this no man's land with a few infantry trying to move and then infantry trying to flank. It's an issue of coordination, I think, to counter some of this. The biggest problem that I have with the tank game as it stands is the fact that, at least on my server, what seems to happen is people will get a ton of tanks together, usually tends to be the TR, because their tanks are currently the best in the game. And not only that, but I think they're currently the best in the game.
Well, we did it before they were really awesome anyway.
Yeah, and they will push with that and very little infantry and just mechanics of the way tank combat works, and the maps are laid out. They will get into an area, and then they will just sit there and pound it with HE, and you can't do a damn thing. And they usually have enough anti-air, you can't even counter it with anti-air, and you can't counter it with armor because their tanks are so good.
And that's when you call in the rocket artillery. Wait, no, we don't have that. Okay.
Yeah. And so what will be interesting is when/if orbital strikes come into this game.
Oh, that cannot come in. Please don't bring in orbital strikes.
I really don't want orbital strikes to be a thing.
But you know,
that's just too hard to regulate.
It is hard to regulate.
It's also there's no counterplay to that. I mean, you've seen the extra credits talking about counterplay. The idea is one guy with a laser sits back here and gets 50 kills for doing nothing but pointing at things he wants to die. That's not fun.
No, it's not, and I think that was a significant issue with PlanetSide 1, and I hope that I would like to see something similar, like some kind of orbital artillery barrage, but just not overpoweringly good.
What about player-done artillery? Battlefield games, for example.
Yes.
Battlefield Vietnam, you used to actually have to sit there with binoculars and
call in artillery strikes,
something.
yeah.
And another player on an artillery piece would have to sit there.
I would
and
love that. That would
fire.
be, and you know what?
That would be something.
And I honestly think that would be a great counter to this tank issue that we currently have, which is that any faction that really masses tanks,
anybody
except for the Vanu,
hunting artillery.
And here's the reason why I say that a Vanu tank Zerg in that similar close quarter situation, like I'm thinking surrounding a tech plant, why the Vanu it doesn't work for them, and why our tank Zergs can't make these encircle them, encroach, sit there pushes. And it's the very simple fact that we use hover tanks and we have to turn the whole goddamn thing to look at things. Which means that our back ends, ass ends end up getting exposed to a huge variety of angles. We can't easily swivel onto target. This is the advantage that turreted tanks have is in close quarters.
Yep.
And we start bumping things like, I can hit that light assault if I just turn a little bit more, and then you hit a rock and you stop turning. I mean, your tanks don't have those issues.
True.
And that's why I think there's, at least as a Vanu player, there's no good counter right now to a massive tank Zerg, especially since our tanks can no longer go up gentle inclines.
Well, anyway, we're going to move on to talking more specifically about the different vehicles here in a second. But I would prefer to see fewer stronger vehicles. But I know there are other people out there that would rather have more. It's like you said, it's very difficult to put those limitations on things in a way that doesn't troll people. Or allow people to troll.
I think that there's a great way to counter that because we already see it in PlanetSide a lot, and stuff like lightnings are awesome because as an individual person against like a Sunder and you can do some really awesome things with the lightning. You really can. What I would love to see are really powerful vehicles like that, but that require like 6 people to operate to operate at their full capacity.
Multi-crewed vehicles.
Multi-crewed vehicles. That give a ton of points when they're killed and really require like the driver maybe has.
I'm positive we're going to see some like heavy tank. Like the main battle tanks are going to be considered medium tanks at some point. We're going to see heavy tanks for each faction rolled out, like a quad prowler and like a super vanguard or whatever they wind up calling them. And those will probably be very expensive. But anyway, that kind of brings us into, let's start talking about the different vehicles. So air vehicles. Let's talk about the escort strike fighters or Empire-specific fighters, whatever you want to call them. The ESFs, the Reaver, the Scythe, and the fucking Mosquito that always gets away. What do you guys think? Are they in a good place right now? We kind of touched on this earlier, but are there any tweaks that you would think needed for the class as a whole?
Yeah, those missile tweaks we talked about earlier, because the rocket pods are overpowered against infantry. They're really good against tanks. The only thing they can't kill is other ESFs, and occasionally you can sometimes do it against some of the pilots that play, and Sunders. Because right now, rocket pods slaughter things. Not so much the Vanu ones, because ours are like half damage. You actually need to hit with 2 rockets to do the equivalent damage to like 1 Mosquito rocket. They're terrible. But those mossy rocket pods can just shoot for the breaker rockets on the Reaver do ass loads of damage, and they just can shred infantry, which they really shouldn't be doing, and they can shred tanks, which they really should be doing, but not to the degree.
I think the problem is not that they can do those things; it's just that they do them simultaneously.
That's what I mean. That they do them simultaneously, and they do them so well. That's my problem. Is that they do both things.
The only thing stopping
well.
them is that render distance is really the major issue.
And against vehicles, that's not such an issue. And I have no problem with long-range rocket strikes against tanks. That's what helicopters do. That's what ESS should be doing.
What would you think about if the rocket pods were one shot and you're done, and then you're using your main cannon for the rest of the time?
That wouldn't be very fun.
No, not very fun. Fair enough.
Because you have to keep it fun for them. You have to remember that in these balancing things, you can't just be like, okay, well, from the point of view this, you have to make the balancing mechanics fun for everybody, or you're just punishing players.
Fair enough. All right, so Liberators, Army Knife, we were talking about Liberators before, and you brought something up interesting. You wanna clarify what you were talking about before? That Liberators you shouldn't even take a Liberator?
Yeah, Liberators are kind of obsolete at this point in the game. With the way things are currently running, there is really little point to take a Liberator, because the ESFs are so effective at killing infantry, especially if you have an ESF rocket pod Zerg. And the Zephyr got nerfed, so there's no reason for that. It's an issue when the best weapon for the Liberator is the Dalton. And we're talking about both killing infantry, killing other strike fighters, killing everything is the best weapon, is currently considered to be the Dalton, because that really should just be an anti-tank weapon. Now the problem with Liberators is they're slow. They have a very large target area. They can, people tend to focus them when they get hit, and they can't really defend themselves well against ESFs. Sure, there are the bad ESF pilots that'll fly straight at you. You might be able to afterburner up into them or something and make them ram you, and you kill them by ramming them, but that's really not a great tactic. So they're too hard to defend without a lot of air support. They don't actually counter things very well. They can be really good against infantry if they're up very high with a very high level of zoom inserted into a Dalton or a Zephyr, at which point you just call in a couple of ESFs and they're dead. And even, other Liberators can hunt Liberators. That is probably the only thing I really ever use my Liberator for at this point, is the Tank Buster on it can shred other Liberators. and their role is now filled by ESFs with rocket pods. And some people start using Galaxies with Bulldogs on either side, because Galaxies take a lot more to kill, and the Bulldogs are just as good against infantry, if not better. And they're just as speedy / unmaneuverable as a Liberator, but they can also be troop transports, in addition to just being mobile gunship platforms with two walkers on them instead of just one at the tail. So the Galaxy right now is kind of a open secret among the outfits really up on their metagame, that it is a replacement for the Liberator, and the Liberator has no purpose anymore, especially with ESFs filling some of its role and the Galaxy.
Post-Zephyr nerf, really, that Zephyr nerf really hit hard, because it used to be large or a bunch of dug-in infantry, all with anti-tank missiles on a ridge line that are just tearing apart your tank column, and it used to be bring in a Liberator, or a huge swarm of tanks. Okay, bring in a Liberator. But
yeah, for a long time I would jump in. We would run into a stalemate, and I would say, okay, so and so, meet me at the warp gate. We're grabbing a Liberator, and we'd go in on a run, and we get a ton of kills and force them to cover. Which is the point. After they went into cover, we couldn't just annihilate them anymore. But now, every time I come anywhere near the fight, I get locked out, like, time to leave, and I can't even leave before dying. The thing is so slow. ESFs are still around because they're fast enough.
Yes, and Galaxies can do it because they have the armor.
Yeah, they can just tank it.
They can tank some of it and get away, and those Bulldogs with high zoom are just as good as a Zephyr was, if not better.
Yep.
So that's what I mean. Liberators are entirely obsolete at this point in the game. There's no reason for them aside from shooting down other Liberators.
With the Shredder. With the Shredder that's useless for everything else except shooting down other Liberators. And
or the occasional suicide run against Sunderer, because that's what it's going to be. there's enough annihilators and other anti-air now that if you try to make a run against a Sunderer with the tank buster, it's going to be a suicide run. But you know what? You might be able to get it.
Yeah, you finish it off by flying into it for the last quarter health.
And that goes back to an earlier point of what is the point of this air? And the point of the Liberator was to suppress infantry, and it can't even do that anymore.
I think it should shoot poison gas. That'll do. But actually, no. A very interesting point that East made earlier was that the Liberator, the Zephyr used to be good at everything. Right? It used to be good at killing infantry, it used to be good at killing tanks. It was a killing machine. And they nerfed it so that it's only supposed to be good at killing infantry now, and even then it's not as good at killing them. But the Dalton being, but the problem I have, if you say, okay, the Dalton should only be good at killing tanks, I don't like that, because if I've had plenty of situations where I'm in a stalemate with somebody, I said, I'm going to go get a Liberator with a Dalton because we have a bunch of tanks here. By the time I get to the warp gate, get with my gunner, get up in the air, and fly back to the facility we were fighting at, most of the tanks are destroyed, and there's infantry targets that I can't kill because I've got a Dalton. This was back when the Zephyr was way better. Dalton's still decent against infantry now, but back then I was like, damn, I wish I had a Zephyr. When they make it so that you can deconstruct your vehicle and reconstruct it with new weapons, or even just swap the weapons out when sitting on a pad, then I will be okay with weapons being very specific.
I think the Liberator would be a lot better at that point once we can actually switch to counter, because, I mean, just like Arminife's saying, at this point, the Galaxy's doing the same job better.
And I've even seen NC outfits, and people are starting to do it. We've seen it with videos and stuff, that they'll say, okay, we need to get our troops from A to B. Every individual person grab a Galaxy. Because Galaxies are so hard to kill that they've just become individual transports for some people.
That's the other thing, is we're talking about resources. Instead of one Galaxy that if everybody on the ground targets it, you lose 12 guys, you fly in 12 Galaxies. And now if one goes down, you still got 11 people left that can land on the crown.
Because by the time you're done fighting and taking the facility, you'll have all 400 air resources back anyway, so it doesn't matter.
And you know what I would honestly love to see done to the Liberator?
What's that?
Is to give it the ability to have much more maneuverable, more speed, and then give it the ability to mount a second anti-air turret, a second walker. Because then we'd have this cool thing of Liberator anti-air gunships, which I think would be, and then the ability to mount air-to-air missiles. I think that would be very cool, and it would require a crew to operate, and then it can be essentially be an air-to-air tank. It would replace the fact that the Galaxy can currently kind of do that, but because whenever anybody sees the larger target, they tend to focus on the larger target.
Yeah.
So your ESFs are going to be safe. But I just think it'd be cool to see air-to-air Liberators, and that would give it a whole new life too, because it's like, oh, they have a ton of ESFs around. We can't go one on one.
They did it originally. Do you remember when they had the Sky Guard on the Liberators in the beta? That was ridiculous. The Sky Guard was so powerful. Now the Shredder's about half as powerful as the Sky Guard used to be. Anyway, so that's that's some interesting ideas. I very similar ideas I share when I turn into Yoda for some reason. Let's talk about Galaxies, as we were just talking about that in the past. Now, Galaxies, as you say, are like just flying flashes at this point. They feel like their role is missing.
Well, no,
I kind of wish there was more
I think
to
it's
them.
not that their role is missing. I think it's that they fill too many roles too well. Because Galaxies currently are used as individual transports like Flashes. They're used as group transports, which is okay because it's nice to have those coordinated pushes with them. They're used as ground pounders in the place of Liberators. They're also used to literally fly down on top of and squish things, and they're also used to literally fly into and squish ESFs and other things. They're just too good at everything.
They do squish things. They like squishing sides. The thing that I have a problem with is most of the time it seems like if the Galaxy's being used as a troop transport, I kind of like the idea of putting some bulldogs on it and seeing how that actually happens. But what usually winds up happening is we need to get to point B, which is over difficult terrain, so we grab a galaxy and everybody jumps in it, and once we get there, the galaxy doesn't have anything to do because after we get there, we can spawn a Sunderer and drive that to the next place. Or the galaxy, if it tries to stay overhead and support, is shot down because it's a giant target, or is forced off, or when it comes back to pick them up, winds up getting shot on the way there, or focused by an ESF. Done as soon as you get to your first place, because most of the time they just go, it's more, if it's an actual middle of the battle zone, like if there's nobody there, Galaxy can just go from place to place, dropping people off and ghost capping, right? Everybody knows
9 times out of 10, that's what I use them for.
Right, so that's one of the roles that they're using, but nobody agrees that's fun. Ghost capping, hopefully, theoretically, if they design the game better in the future and we're putting more things in that'll make ghost capping less likely, then we won't have to worry about that. But if you're in a frontline zone, galaxies just don't seem to serve a situation where you can get a bunch of people in them and go from place to place.
We've already seen the solution to this. And it's not to make them spawn points, but it's to do what they had in beta, which is when you land the galaxy, you deploy it, and it switches to being considered a ground target. So that it suddenly is not getting a ton of damage from anti-air. I think that is the solution. If they you don't need a spawn point, you just need to be able to deploy it so that its wings can go down and it can protect
mobile
the
fortification, because it gets that nice little force field up, and it gives your guys a safe
not even a force field, but the fact that it's considered a ground target, and you still got bulldogs and anti-air stuff on it. If you made it like like you just said, a mobile kind of mini fortress without the ability to spawn, I think that's a much cooler use, and it solves all these issues of galaxies being considered disposable.
Yeah, I'd love that, actually, now that you mention it, and sort of make it a fallback point. So you drop everybody off on the front line, you take a bunch of damage, but you drop down behind a cliff, or not a cliff, but drop down in some woods or something behind a tree, and you turn into a support platform, and somebody, the squad leader puts a spawn beacon down next to it, and from there you can change classes, you can spawn, maxes or whatever. I don't know. Change class. Yeah. I've also thought of the idea of making it a spawn point, but a spawn point that works. It ties directly into the squad leader's spawn beacon. Like, I kind of think like he should be able to put his spawn beacon
your squad only.
Yes, your squad only.
Like an upgrade
in the galaxy.
Like your squad only.
Not even necessarily an upgrade. I would like for the squad leader to like go over to the galaxy and like use his squad beacon on the galaxy, and then it gets like a flashing light on the tail showing that it's a spawn, but it's only a spawn every 3 minutes or whatever that spawn beacon normally is. So instead of dropping from space, your squad will automatically respawn in a galaxy, and then as a group you can go and drop again on the same target, or as a second wave, right? The first wave, you come in from the waypoint, everybody drops down, tries to get a spawn point, tries to take the point. If they fail, they go back and they're still in the same location. The galaxy's still flying overhead. They get one drop before they have to wait for a 3-minute timer. If the first one fails. So they get 2 waves of attack instead of 1. The reason the galaxy's not as preferred to a Sunderer for frontline duty is because if you use a galaxy to get somewhere and it's contested, by the time you get there and drop everybody off, there's no spawn point to help you. Everybody has to bring a Sunderer in addition to a galaxy, and if you're bringing a Sunderer, why do you need the galaxy? So that's why I like the idea of making it built into the spawn beacon so that it can act as the thing, hey, it's the backup, so that you don't need a Sunderer 100%. It's also way harder to kill than just a spawn beacon sitting on the ground because it can move, but at the same time it's way more vulnerable than a spawn beacon sitting on the ground because it can't just hide behind something never being noticed. It's flying around in the air, pretty easy to see.
Well, that I've seen that. I'm sure I've seen that in some other first-person shooter.
I think Desert Combat had that for the mod for Battlefield 1942. I'm almost positive they had one.
And I think Battlefield 2 might have implemented it, and it was actually a pretty good mechanic. But I still think that the solution is to just make it a fortress. And that spawn mechanic would be very cool, and it would work well. And it would further enhance the, make it a certain thing, like you said, and it would further enhance the ability for the galaxy to fly in, settle down, become a fortress, and protect the troops that are repairing it. Make it not vulnerable to anti-air fire, so you actually don't lose your Galaxy. You can keep using it. It's just overall, I think, a better way of treating that vehicle than the way it is. And some might say it makes it too powerful, but then suddenly the Dalton has a role again.
Yes, exactly. The Dalton can knock out Galaxy forts.
Galaxy killer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just, I mean, especially like with Bridger's idea, it really promotes team play, which is good. That's the whole point of this MMO, is to get everybody, team play, that kind of stuff. So because only squads are going to be using it, it's not just going to be like Bob and his friend Joe. It's going to be them and 8 of their. At that point, the only people that are going to be using it are organized. It's not just going to be like it used to be, where you would just plop down 3 galaxies and the entire team would zerg onto them as spawn points.
Yep.
So I think it would not give you the problem that they had as spawn points that way, and still give them a purpose. They're little spawn forts that, again, the Dalton could be used to effectively knock out.
All right, so let's move on to ground vehicles, because we're running way over the time limit that I had set for this. But let's talk ground vehicles. What about the Flash? Do you guys? I mean, the Flash serves its purpose. It's okay. I got left behind. I missed the Sunderer when it was leaving, or the Galaxy when it was leaving, or for whatever reason I stayed here to cap this while everybody else went to the biolab, and now I need to catch up, and I can't redeploy because they're in a place and the Sunderer's not set up. I grab a Flash. I go. It takes me 10 minutes. I'm there. No problem. Or 5 minutes or 2 minutes because the Flash is fast, because it's a Flash. So, are there any weapons for the Flash that stand out as being useful? I've heard the Bulldog is good. You can put something like the Bulldog on it, right?
I've seen a guy camping a spawn with the Bulldog.
You mean the Fury?
That is
the Fury,
Bulldog,
sorry.
Fury. Yeah,
no, you're right. The Fury is the one. Yep.
The Fury, yeah. My mistake. And so, I want to say that's really one of the only practical uses for it, other than, I mean, just as a taxi from A to B.
I've actually had huge kill streaks using the, I shouldn't forget the name of it again, but the machine gun on it. Not the Basilisk, but the actual anti-infantry, the Cobalt. Because the Cobalt can be used to snipe with the Flash in your mobile platform. In addition to that, did you guys know that the Flash can mount radar? And that it can mount many levels of very far-reaching radar?
Yeah,
and
the
that
Flash, I think, can mount the largest, because I know they have a scout
and not
radar.
only that, but unlike tanks, it will relay that information to all of your squad mates.
Only your squad mates, not your faction?
It might be faction. I haven't checked that, but at the very least, squad mates, and that you don't even have to be on it for it to be doing that.
So That's actually kind of cool.
That's right. I read about that.
You can set that up behind a hillside where you're lining up all your troops, and you'll know.
You know how people just leave flashes out when they get there? Somebody will think that's all it is, and they won't bother trying to destroy it in the middle of a firefight. But it's actually giving everybody's location, so you can look on your minimap and see there's 4 guys in that building there. It's like a mobile wall hack.
That's why we destroy flashes when we see them for the most part. Even though it's obvious whether or not there's radar on it, if you're usually at something of a range, we usually try and blow them up because just because we are paranoid about other people doing that.
All right, so the Scout Raider is a very cool upgrade. You've obviously got the turbo that can boost it up the hills and fly into space at some point, but I think they fixed that. Is there any other upgrades that you think are really useful? Seems likely that this racer high-speed chassis is probably the one that most people are going to get, because most people use it as a personal taxi, so why not?
Yeah, not only that, but with the racer high speed and a Fury, there's the potential for killing other vehicles.
All right, so the Fury is a little grenade launcher similar to the to whatever we were talking about before, the Bulldog. There we go. Wow, I'm having a hard time here. And the Cobalt is interesting too. I really do want to get one of these on here. The Basilisk is the same kind of thing that's on top of the Sunderers by default, right? It's effective against light armor and against infantry as well. So that's kind of a nice one too, because you could charge an enemy Sunderer firing your Basilisk and then go out for another pass. Since you don't have a turret, you have to shoot it only when you're
strafing them with a flash. That's awesome.
That doesn't seem likely. All right, so flashes we think are in a good place, right? They don't really need anything to be more useful.
Yeah, they do their role. They
exactly
perform their role, and they've got some quirks, which makes them pretty cool.
So let's talk about Sunderers. Because before the Sunderer had its special upgrade to turn it into a spawn point, it was, in the beta, specifically designed as a breach vehicle. I mean,
And nobody used it.
and nobody used it until you started seeing people get the smoke upgrades, because that was really cool. But I imagined when I read about this, you know, I was looking at it and I was like, wow, that's a, you know, big APC. There were plenty of, before they turned the Galaxy, you know, spawn points on, there were a lot of really cool fights where both sides would be entrenched and they're both trying to cross this open field, this no man's land, and nobody had vehicle certifications or air shit. Nobody knew how to fly planes at the time, so it was all ground. And you know, one side would try to make a charge to the first tree, they'd get shut down, and I can imagine, like, if we could only get, like, 2 Sunderers filled with people to get behind the rock that all those enemies are hiding behind and pour out of the Sunderers and kill everybody, that would be really cool. That's what the role that I envisioned it in my head, right? Problem is, once they made it a spawn point, it had to be weak enough to kill, because if it's not weak, then it's way too powerful a thing. Because if you can't kill their spawn point, what the hell, how can you ever stop them? But if it's so weak that you can kill it when it's sitting still as a spawn point, then that means if it's charging straight through the enemy, it's probably going to die just as fast. I kind of wish...
I have to say, blockade armor at max level can really fix that.
So that's the one that replaces stuff like Mind Guard and those other things. Yeah. I kind of wish there was something that was similar to that, but in the utility slot. But I guess maybe that's the smoke screen. It also has proximity radar, which is much shorter than the Scout's radar.
And only for the vehicle.
I kind of love the idea of the smoke screen, but I've never seen people use it effectively, which is too bad.
Well, you need to start fighting against my outfit again. We don't do it from the vehicles, but we do it from our infantry men, where it's a little more useful. But you know, I think what I haven't seen, because I don't think anybody's gotten organized enough and spent enough certs to do it, but we should start seeing at some point, is the Sunderer replacing the main battle tank, because.
Wait,
now that it has,
what?
Because they are ridiculously hard to kill. You can mount one with Mind Guard. Even rank 1 will protect it from, you know, getting hit by 2 mines enough that it won't die. They can mount anti-aircraft weapons in both slots. They can mount grenade launchers and basilisks that can hunt tanks, and they can mount stuff that kills infantry, and they can carry infantry. And you can put blockade armor on them that makes them very hard to kill. So you can have one with blockade armor, and then they can dispense their own ammo and auto-repair
each other. Yeah, so a big thing back in beta related to that, which is why I'm hoping they don't replace the main battle tanks, is because they used to initially give armor and ammo at the same time, is you used to be able to take 4 Sunderers and just plant them all next to each other, and they were just unkillable, and they could just kill everything. So
yeah, so that's what I mean by I could see roving bands of 4 to 5 Sunderers kind of replacing main battle tanks, or at the very least being a good spearhead to counter a main battle tank Zerg, simply because people are going to focus fire them, A, so your MBTs get less fire taken on them, B, they can actually absorb that fire, especially with an auto repair Sunday with them, and C, they actually have enough guns, if you mass that many of them with even just basilisks, to do significant damage to tanks.
Yeah, definitely the basilisks.
Well, with the Furies on them, too, though.
Are the Furies mostly anti-infantry, though?
No,
the Bulldogs.
The Bulldogs are anti-infantry. Yeah, the Furies are grenade launchers that are anti-tank.
Yeah, and I have done that many times. I have beaten other Empires' main battle tanks with a Sunderer with a pair of Furies on it without... that much difficulty, so it is very possibly a thing. It just requires a lot more people.
Yeah, and with the racer chassis, you can even just run up, you know, behind them and start pegging them the rear armor. The only faction I don't see that working on is the TR because of their fucking Vulcans.
All right. But at the moment, obviously, the Sunderer mostly fits its role as a spawn point. That's what everybody uses it as. Some of these upgrades can help you with that too. Like the high-speed chassis can get you in and out of situations. The weapons on the top are certainly useful, and I usually leave it with the main basilisk on it because I like the ability for my Sunderer to at least damage tanks, especially because if we're moving as a group, and I've got a Sunderer and maybe 2 other tanks, and we come across enemy tanks, if my Sunderer is completely useless, that's going to kind of suck. But if I don't need to worry about air, because if air shows up, everybody jumps out and just bursts them to down. But, we'll see. So anyway, that's the Sunderer. Any final thoughts on the Sunderer? Anything that needs to happen with the Sunderer in comparison? Like we were talking about, the Liberator needs something. Does the Sunderer need something? Is it
more
missing?
hubcaps?
Yeah! More hubcaps. Okay.
Better horns.
Let's talk about the Lightning. The Lightning's in an interesting position. East, is there any point at which you could take a Prowler, but instead you're like, no, I'm going to go with a Lightning?
There are days when I just feel like mixing it up, and I'll grab a Lightning.
But from
I've got some, I've got the 100mm gun on it and other stuff. So, it's not the worst. And I use it for shelling things randomly, even though the Prowler goes through ammo very fast.
Mm-hmm.
But really, if I can take a Prowler and I have the resources, which is almost always, I'm going to pull a Prowler because it's amazing. So, especially now that it's gotten kind of buffed.
Yep. The Lightning kind of fills a weird role. It's like, okay, it's the tank you take if you don't have access to your main battle tank. And I kind of... I'd rather it had its own role. And
I agree, and not just anti-infantry.
Right.
I'm sorry, anti-air, not just anti-air.
Right, that is its unique role, is it can have the Sky Guard. But I kind of feel like the Lightning, its namesake, is the fact that it's fast. That's supposed to be the advantage of light tanks, right?
Here's the thing with, obviously, it's not the fastest thing ever, but, it's very fast for our ground vehicles here. Now, as ATR player, obviously I take the Prowler because it's just as fast almost. But for the slower the Vanguards, and especially the Mag Riders who don't have the option of a turret, I do feel that it does give them that option. For the close quarters fighting, you can take...
oh, no, you can't.
A Lightning for the heat rounds.
I'll say this, even with the heat or the AP rounds, I still prefer my Mag Rider in close quarters over them, simply because the Lightning has no armor.
It's true.
Yeah, exactly. That is the problem. It is so squishy, but it's fast. But I have ran circles around Vanguards and them.
Yeah, and I think killing Vanguards is quite doable in a Lightning. I don't know about killing Mag Riders. I imagine that's also fairly doable because they have a very slow turning speed, even with the rival combat chassis.
But again, this is something I don't need because I have Prowlers. So I would like to see the Lightning given a better role aside from
what the Lightning is very good at is hill climb, but given the weakness of even its AP gun, that's not necessarily a useful thing to have. I will say that I would like it if their weapons actually did a significant portion of damage. Like if you could mount
glass
guns on
cannons.
those. Yeah,
basically.
if they were
they
glass
should do
cannons.
at least like 80 to 85% as much damage as like the main battle tanks.
No, I think they should do. I think they should do. I think the AP gun on that thing should do more damage than even the Prowler, or about as much damage maybe as a Vanguard main gun AP to tanks, simply because then suddenly it actually has a use. The HE Lightning is actually still very good against infantry, and because of its speed, it is very difficult to hit with non-lock-on rockets, which is nice. So there's a role it has. But if it also did a lot of damage with its AP gun to enemy tanks, that would be awesome, especially as a Vanu player, because then I feel like I could just be like on public channel, be like, release the hounds, and then they all run underneath our Mag Riders because they can do that. I don't know if that's a well-known fact outside of the Vanu players, but the Lightnings can run under our Vanguards, so we can literally unleash them. They can run under our Mag Riders, so we can literally unleash Lightnings on you if we wish.
That's cool. I do wish the Lightnings were a little bit... Like, the speed and acceleration discrepancy between the Lightning and the main battle tanks, I kind of wish it was slightly larger. Whether that means that the Lightning should be a little bit faster or turn a little tighter or something. But, I don't know. I kind of wish that was the case, because then you could think, what do I need right now? I need something fast. But it's like, okay, I'm driving down a road in my Vanguard, and it's going like 54 kilometers per hour. And when I take a Lightning, it's like 66 kilometers per hour. It's like, man, I'm going way faster than the other thing. And when I take a Flash, I'm going 70. Oh man, that's way faster. Like everything goes fast by default.
The other thing there are two other significant issues with the Lightning. One is that the stock weapon is god awful.
Yes.
It is
It's
terrible
actually
at just
kind of
about
cool,
everything.
though. I like it. It's actually great against
no.
infantry.
I don't think it's that good against infantry.
It's,
Honestly.
If you hit all
Especially
5
as
shots in
squishy
a
as now.
bunch of
The
infantry,
thing
you're going to
is,
get a bunch of kills.
in PlanetSide 1, the Lightning actually filled a role, which was that it could do anti-infantry too, because it had a chain gun on it that you could switch it. So it had two weapons. It had a cannon like the current one does.
Is it like a
and then it had a
coaxial?
chain
It was
gun.
on the same turret, right?
Yes, but it was like just literally offset mounted.
Right.
But still, that actually allowed it to be useful, because then you could use it for two roles. You could use it against tanks and you could use it against infantry without worrying about this wimpy ass heat thing that can kind of do damage to a tank if you only hit it from behind, but otherwise
all
you're fucked because
6
they see
shots in your burst.
Yeah. So that, I think, give it back that for taking out infantry might make it a little bit nicer, but as it is, it's just not very good. It just isn't.
There's just no reason to take it over a main battle tank unless you want that Skyguard, and that's the only thing that my Lightning is almost always used
even
as a
at this
Skyguard.
point, that's debatable, considering the main battle tanks can mount Rangers and Walkers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now that we have especially now that we have the Rangers.
I like being that guy, though. When the platoon says we're getting a bunch of tanks, I like being. I know nobody else is going to take a Skyguard.
A guy.
Yeah, I like being the one guy because
Every-
then I probably get the kill of all the air that we shoot at. So there you go.
Yeah, but again, it just doesn't fill a role, and in PlanetSide 1, it filled that role of being the tank that you took when you were A, alone, and B, were going up against mixed units, because tanks were a lot harder to kill by infantry in those days. So if it just mounted like a Cobalt on it in addition to its gun, I think you'd see a lot more people being pissed about it, but it would actually have a nice role, because I get excited when a Lightning rolls up. Honestly, when I have my Decimator, I'm like, oh boy, a Lightning
2-shot
just
kill.
appeared.
It's so cute.
Because it's so easy to kill. You get behind it with the Decimator, one shot is half of its health, and then you reload and hide behind a tree or something.
That's
and
what I'm
they're
saying. If you're going to
looking
make it that light in terms of armor, make the thing really move. Like, make it move damn near as fast as a Flash at max, but also have it turn fast.
And not just that, but also have the capacity to engage two types of targets at once. Because main battle tanks have the secondary gunner. The limitation on the Lightning is its lack of armor and the fact that you're one dude.
Yeah.
So can make it
I
capable of
agree with
engaging
you.
two things.
I would love to see a coaxial machine gun that you could, like, the secondary fire, essentially, fire as a coaxial
it's not like you're
machine
going to be able
gun.
to do two completely simultaneously. You're going to have to switch between the
Yeah,
two
you
of
can
them.
only point your gun
where
in
a
one
main
direction.
battle tank can obviously shoot simultaneously at multiple things in different directions.
And the other thing is, if you have a heat, or not an HE on your Lightning, that's going to be way more effective than your Cobalt. But the Cobalt is at least a decent backup if you're going with an AP.
Exactly, and I think that would, again, that allows it to fill that awkward role that we actually aren't really getting filled by the MBTs, which is, we kind of are, and it's better with the I think actually the Vanu than it is with the than anybody else as far as their MBTs being able to engage two types of target at once, simply because the Sauron has so much reach. But the MBTs require two people, and they require coordination, and they have huge target profiles. And the Lightnings have that low-profile hill climb advantage. So again, like I've just been saying it 5 times in a row, and I'll say it again: give it a Cobalt, in addition to the weapon that it already has.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk now the main battle tanks. We kind of covered them a lot before. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think needs to be brought up? I mean, they seem pretty suited to their role of being the main tank, like we were just talking about. If you have a choice, you always take your main battle tank over the Lightning most of the time. They seem to fit the role well.
Yeah, I still think that there's a lack of balance in the MBTs, and it's not that they need to be made more like one another. is that the projectile speed on the Prowler is fucking ridiculous, let's be honest. It's the closest hit scan you'll ever see in a tank in a game that is made after 2004. And that's before you even talk about deploying it. And it's got 2 guns, 2 shells to fire. The Vanguard kind of sucks. It can take a lot of hits, though. Like, I was trying it out last night.
Well, it also hits like a freight train, though, with that single shot. Because the problem with the Prowler, even though it has 2 shots, is your first shot's going to hit where you're pointing it. That second shot, not so much if you fire it in quick succession.
Unless you learn to slow down with your shooting, which no
Well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, the whole point of having that huge rate of fire bonus when you deploy is to have as many shells in the air simultaneously as possible. That's the TR way.
Yes. And the thing about it, at least from my experience, is the reload time on that one shell that the Vanguard gets is a long time. It's like a good 3.5 seconds at least. I think it's even more than that, but it definitely feels like a very long time. Like, I fire at something and it's runs to cover before my second shot goes off, and I'm like, damn it.
And I noticed that when I was trying it out, and I was like, How can the NC play with this tank? That being said, you do have the only lock-on anti-tank top turret, which is kind of cool. And if you're getting shot at from the front, you can just laugh at literally any tank that's shooting at you. Like, you did a sliver of health, which is cool. So I think the Vanguard really requires that... Enforcer, I think it is, but speed up the reload time on it a little bit, and it's good to go. It's golden. The Mag Rider kind of sucks now. Its only advantage really before was that your projectile speeds were slow enough that it could strafe out of the way, and that it could get up on terrain that you guys couldn't get onto and have really cool firing positions. Now that you guys have both increased projectile velocity and increased accuracy on all of your weapons, because the Vanu tanks used to be the only ones that could engage at long range. The other tanks would start shooting off wildly in other directions. So that was a cool advantage, because if you got in close to us, we were dead. So that was like the only advantage. And the terrain thing, now that we can't hill climb at all, and that you guys are very accurate and have really high speed projectiles, so we can't dodge them, we kind of have the worst tank in the game.
Well, I'd like to see what the statistics are after the changes. They might need to roll them back a little bit in order to balance things up again.
We would be happy, I can tell you that we would be happy to just have the hill climb back. You guys can keep your accuracy and your projectile speed. That's cool.
And I honestly, that was something I didn't have a problem with the Mag Rider. I love finding those Mag Riders in crazy kooky places and sneaking up on them with a mosquito going hee hee. So...
just give us back our hill climb and the ability to get into interesting firing positions, and you'll see that the game becomes a little more balanced, especially since you put us in the timeout corner on Indar.
Yeah, and in case you're wondering, Sony, when he says interesting fire positions, what he means is the top of Scarred Mesa Skydock.
I don't think it needs to get that interesting.
Maybe not.
But like there's that hill overlooking on the right of Quartz Ridge, right by the gate. Now that you guys have both been into that area, how there's those nice hills. We used to be able to get Mag Riders up on top of that.
And
not the
shoot
one to the
down
left.
into the cave and into the
but on the right, that little we could get Mag Riders up on top of there and shoot down into the valley, and that was the only goddamn way you can counter a massive Prowler swarm, is to actually have a better firing position. And the other thing that I've noticed about MBTs, and this could just have been the fact that I was trying it on Connery. I don't know about Waters. I don't know about all the servers. But it seems like because of those interesting firing positions, I think the Vanu are the only people who have really learned how to use our MBTs. Because what I see a lot of times are people just sort of stand still. They stop moving. Or they're shooting while moving. And you can kind of do that with... But I just think that there's... The Vanu learned how to use their MBTs because they are so different, and a lot of people haven't actually learned how to effectively use the tanks that they were given.
True. Actually, one more thing before we go. I just remembered, and I should have put this at the beginning. I learned about, in 300, how the guy shows them the goat path to get around behind the 300 and screw over their whole day. I found the goat path on Indar. I didn't know it existed until today when I was running with DigiRev. And we took the Crossroads Watchtower here, and they said, we need to go to Gravel Pass. And I'm like, well, fuck that. We're going to have to go all the way around to TI Alloys. No. We're just going to go over the mountain. Like, we got a Sunderer and a tank column. We can't go over the mountain. And he's like, oh, yes, we can. There's a road. I'm like, that's not a road. That's a gully that water runs down. He's like, well, that's a gully that water runs down that tanks and Sunderers can climb, motherfucker. And so you can see it here. It's outlined. You can actually go up this road and down the other side right into Gravel Pass, and vice versa. You can also go back the other way. And there
goes my best kept secret Sunderer spawn location.
Right up in that little tiny spot. That's a great thing to know, because otherwise whoever owns Tarwish owns everything that tries to get between the two.
Back in beta, how we because the spawns warp gate locations were exactly how they were back towards the second half of beta, and that is how we would get down and attack Tarwitch every time, because they'd always expect us to come through the fortress gates they've got there.
Yep.
So
yeah, but actually just for assaulting Broken Arch Road down there, that's a great place to stick a Sunday until people know about it.
Yeah.
Just because it's so out of the way and most people aren't going to even notice it going by. Not only that, but actually with Sunderers, you can literally go straight over the mountain there from Crossroads.
Yep.
It's a shallow enough thing that you can just drive straight.
I am, however, going to start referring to it as the goat path.
Yeah.
Now it has a name.
I don't know. I don't know, because if you go back to Amherst, there is an even more the goat path, which is the one that I was talking about.
Ooh, where's that?
If you pull up the Amherst map and you go to Raven Landing.
Where's Raven?
I'm going to have to... Raven Landing's the other place connected to the Ascent.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So you know how you normally
I
have
saw
to go
that earlier.
Take that really, really long road, zoom in really close on the Ascent.
You can see it right here.
Yes, so that's the start of it, and you can drive asunder up at this little mini bridge, and you can just follow it, and it goes all the way to the Ascent, and you can get asunder up the way coming from Raven Landing, but you cannot get asunder up coming from the Ascent.
Oh, wait a minute, you can't go up from the Ascent?
Not in asunder.
Oh, really? Because it looks like there's a road here. Interesting.
Your mouse is right over a switchback that only infantry can get up, and that's what I was smoke grenading, because there were a ton of TR. But so you can get a Sunder right up there and start coming down to the Ascent, or even using light assaults. And actually, just as a quick other really cool place to fight, go to Stillwater Watch, or is it Stillwater Watch? I think that's the name of it on Amherst. You're on the right continent, but it's south and to the east.
Stillwater Watch.
South. That's north you're going.
I'm south.
Okay, wait, Still Peak, is that it? Yes, right there. Still Peak. I don't know where I came up with. That is a really, really, really cool place to fight. Please hold more battles there. Also, zoom in on that, because I just want to tell you where we somehow managed to get a Sunderer to park. See that really mountainous terrain up to the just northeast of it? We somehow got a Sunderer parked up in the tops of the mountains there.
That's
without
fun.
the hill climb or anything. We just found this weird path, and then we all switched to light assault and jumped over the ridge.
Nice. Yeah, that Split Peak is a fun place to fight.
Yeah, Split Peak.
Where's the other one? There was another really cool spot on here that I'm trying to remember. All right, anyway, this has gone way long enough. We could stare at maps all day and talk about, I get why in the Battle of Black Shard Tungsten Mine, my outfit. We could keep going. All right.
All I'm saying is a public service announcement. Please hold more fights at Split Peak. It is the best place to fight ever.
And it looks like we're getting played off. It's time for you to go. All right. Thank you guys for joining me. East, good to have you with us.
Always good to be here.
All right, and Arminide, very good to see you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
And for the new conglomerate, I'm Bridger. Have a good night, everybody. That's a really cool... What the heck? hell
You
song
had way
is this?
too much fun to that song.
MX main theme GL. I don't know what that is. I don't think I've heard that particular version before. That sounds like the thing that when I'm loading Amarish, but it's not the same. I don't know. All right, thanks guys for watching. I'm turning this off so I can go do something before my voice dies.
Go download War Thunder.
That's what I'm doing. That's right. That's what I'm doing tonight.
So
All right.
what the hell is War Thunder?
All right, I'm shutting the stream